now I'd like to hand over to our second speaker, please, who is Matt Allen, the co-founder and chief exec of Pivot Power. Lots of the points that Mike raised there, Matt, about battery storage, I think we'll come round to questions I'll ask you, and perhaps will come from our online audience. Once again, a note to our online audience. If you have some questions for Matt, please do submit those to us, and I'll be delighted to share those with Matt. But Matt, first of all, if I could just ask you to introduce yourself and Pivot Power. So I know a little bit about Pivot Power from our previous engagements. I know you're a multifaceted solution provider with power generation, e-mobility, and big utility scale non-mobile batteries connecting up with mobile batteries in the form of vehicles. Can you tell us a little bit more about your work at Pivot Power and that model, please?
Sure, happy to, Ed. And yeah, thank you very much for the invite to take part today. First off, so almost a year in now, 1 week to go until the anniversary of the acquisition by EDF Renewables and being part of the wider EDF group. So that's been a great journey to date, and look forward to the future. In terms of the question around multifaceted solutions in the Pivot Power business model, absolutely, to solve a very, very complex problem, which I think we would all agree the climate crisis is a complex one that needs multifaceted solutions. And so a good example, of course, I would say this, is the Pivot Power business model, and what you alluded to, kind of big stationary batteries that are unlocking small mobile batteries in the form of EVs. On the what we refer to as battery co, the big stationary battery sitting next to National Grid's transmission network, that provides system level flexibility that we need to meet our net zero requirements as stated by the government. And so we need more of that at scale, and that's a big part of what that's bringing to the party. On the other side of this, the WireCo component is addressing a lot of the regional constraints that we have in the system. That's always been a bit of a challenge. I'm sure Ollie and Toddington can expand on that in a bit more detail. But so that's a big piece to what we refer to as the WireCo component, is running that power infrastructure to large EV demand centers, and whether that's buses, corporate fleets, distribution centers, taxis, general public charging, and so on. So that's how those two pieces kind of fit together in that multifaceted approach.
Thanks very much indeed, Matt. We've talked a lot now this morning about the technology side of things, the technology infrastructure. I know from our previous conversations, you and I have discussed ideas around the ideas infrastructure, needing to ensure that people are brought on board with these developments. So as you roll out your energy super hub from Oxford to other cities, do you think the ideas infrastructure, bringing people along on your journey, getting local engagement, is that an important part of your role? In
short, yes, absolutely.
Very good.
I can expand on that.
Next question.
Just leave it there. Yes.
Tell us a little more.
Yeah. So I think what I would like to reinforce, champion, highlight is there's not a single road to zero. There never was, and there never will be. There are multiple roads, and Oxford, a fantastic city council to be working with on our first project. We've worked with them very closely to understand where there is the low-hanging fruit. They know Oxford, needless to say, better than we do as a London-based company. And it's the same thing for all of our other sites. Are there lots of buses? Very few buses. Last mile logistics, taxi fleets, is it a destination kind of weekend type city hub, or is there more of a commuter belt? So it's really tapping in and understanding what they want to do. Energy Super Hub Oxford, I definitely feel, is paving the way for what we want to do with this kind of ESX model. Energy Super Hub, Bristol, Brighton, Manchester, Coventry, and so on. But I think that it really is about ideas infrastructure and collaboration and partnerships, and really understanding and tapping into what the local communities want and need.
Very good, thanks. Back to the actual technology infrastructure. I know you've talked about Pivot providing the aspirin for the headache of the shift to electric vehicles. Could you tell us a little bit how that pill popping process works from a Pivot Power perspective, please?
That was impressive. Try to see how many P's I can get into my response. And the reality is regional constraints have always been a challenge, not just in the UK, but other countries. And so a big component to that is providing this Wireco offtake power infrastructure that is scalable. It addresses not just that first megawatt of demand today, but second, third, fourth, fifth megawatt over time. And also ensuring that there is a price point that they can hang their hat on to make sure that they can scale the aspirations and desires. The electrification of transport, just like the mass scale rollout of renewables, it presents a challenge. I mean, anything that is new, unique, and so on does present some real world challenges. The system was not built for the electrification of transport. We have a very aged system, and we're kind of working within those constraints around it. So it does require some kind of thinking outside of the box approaches and how that will all come together. But I think it does start with one of the less kind of exciting components to all this, but where is this copper going to come from? Where is this power infrastructure going to be delivered from? So that is kind of a starting point. Where's that juice going to come from and be delivered to as we scale?
Very good. Could I ask you to do a little bit of bigger picture thinking now then? I know from previous conversations we've had that you've said, that there's a huge system that's been established and enormous changes that have happened over the last 20 years with some future gazing. Where do you think we'll be in the next 20 years? What do you see the journey of the next 20 years as holding for us?
Crystal ball thinking. If I think of the last 20 years, you could kind of look at it as a bit of a seed planting exercise, not to undermine any of the fantastic developments that have actually taken place. I think there's a lot to be proud of, and it is paved the way for what we think I think globally is a very realistic outcome of meeting net zero targets and addressing the ever growing climate crisis. But the next 20 years, although I would cut that in half, we need to figure this out by 2030. And that is, we need to see the planting of these seeds. We need to see some real growth. And that is what's going to be happening, both on kind of the infrastructure side, what the kind of component and the makeup of our electrons are coming from. But one of the things I think that we kind of forgot to do during this large mass scale deployment of fantastic renewables infrastructure is embrace the system level flexibility that's required. We're seeing curtailment in dumping of subsidized electrons in Scotland coming off of wind. We're seeing the same thing in the south in terms of solar generation during peak times, and that's a bit of a travesty. So how do we make sure that we have these, like I refer to them almost as sponges, filling up with that excess water and pushing that out during times of higher demand and need. So this is about growth on the EV side. I think the last 20 years, I mean, the EV rollout has been happening pretty much since the advent of the combustion engine vehicle. But we're starting to see more models, the pace of deployment and uptake. We're seeing cost curves come down, and all of that will continue absolutely and at scale. But we've gone from planting of seeds, and now it's all about growth and really accelerating. Very
good. Thank you very much indeed, Matt. Again, if we have any questions from our online audience, then please do submit those questions. Another final question from me then, Matt, before we go over to online questions from our online audience. I know in previous conversations, you and I have talked about predictable mileage being a sweet spot for Pivot Power with vans and buses and the predictable mileage that those vehicles offer. Could you tell us a little bit more about how that side of things is part of your business model?
Sure, happy to. again, I'll defer to the experts that are living and breathing this, being Ollie and Toddington. But predictability in this electrified transport world is a fantastic thing. It is, again, welcome this to be challenged, especially from Ollie. But when it comes to distribution vans and fleets and so on, we have a very good idea on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, the miles that will be used for that vehicle. And that's a really good starting point. It's the same thing for buses. Less so, but I'd also put taxis into that same bucket. So with the big, and that's a significant amount of the emissions that we can take off of the system very quickly. And so they know that demand on an individual vehicle level, which scales up to how many megawatts they need today and tomorrow as they really accelerate the rollout of those fleets. So I think that is a very, very good starting point. The general public, we don't know exactly how many miles we're going to drive every single day. We don't get me wrong, we absolutely need to provide solutions for the general public to go on this journey as well. But let's start with the low-hanging fruit, and predictable demand is a very, very good place to start. So that is what I'd like to highlight there.
Very good. I will come on to, as you say, to that point again with Ollie Crawn from DPD as our next speaker. But first of all, I'd like to hand over to some questions from our online audience, of which there have been many, I'm delighted to say. An interesting first question, Matt, about battery technology. The question is, what battery technology is the holy grail for grid level storage? Is there one, or is lithium ion the best option?
It's the solution that works now. And don't get me wrong, I am all for innovation. I am all for challenging technologies to step up to the incumbent ones that work. But when I get asked that question, which I do get asked on a very, very regular basis, my response is, this is a climate crisis. And when you're in the middle of a crisis, you focus on the things that work, that are investable, that have been de-risked, that have a track record. And I absolutely welcome and champion innovation to take place. But I do not want us to lose sight of the task, the responsibility that we have today. And there is a real concern that I have that innovation can detract. It can take our focus away to delivering on what we need today. So is it the holy grail? No, I don't know what technology will ever be the holy grail. Is kind of the second point I'd make there, but yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, interesting.
A good question.
Yeah. Another question, more on the kind of recruitment side, from Tim Norford, who asks, are you seeing enough of a particular skill set in potential employees in the marketplace, or is there a particular skill that you see as pivotal to the growth of the industry and that's maybe missing at the moment?
Good question, and nice use of pivotal. There is a transition. I mean, I think what we have seen over the course of the last 10, 15, 20 years in the low carbon generation renewables deployment is, it is attracted incredible talent coming from the incumbent industries, whether it's oil and gas or conventional generation. So I think we have welcomed that community of employees with open arms. I think one of the big things is this is a disruptive industry that requires a bit of a different mindset. We don't know 100% exactly how it's all going to play out. So I think it needs a slight different mentality where you're excited and not daunted by the fact you may not know exactly what's going to happen on Monday. And so I think that's a key point that I would highlight is this is a weird and wonderful journey and roller coaster, and you kind of need to be prepared for what you're getting into. But it's a fantastic time to come into this market, and we've seen incredible talent. I think that we have, of course, I would say that within Pivot Power, but many other companies that I see as well.